My favorite video game franchises of all time. I love all— Oh dear God, what is that thing?
I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic the Hedgehog, you say? That's the stuff of nightmares. With the recent release of another Sonic Boom game, I wanted to revisit the blue blur in all his hollow glory. In case you've forgotten, we made a Sonic video in the past, and holy balls did you guys watch it. But now, nearly 2 years later, it's finally time to catch up with the fastest hedgehog in the land. Last time I entertained you with a fantastical exploration into the history of Sonic. But this time we're going to ask the all-important question that nerds everywhere have been attempting to answer for over a decade. What in all that is holy happened to Sega? Here's a company that was poised to take over the console market, eclipse the Mario franchise, and had the superior technology to do so. So what happened? How did Sega fall from grace, and what role did Sonic have to play in it? In this episode of The Story You Never Knew, I unearth the real answer that so many pissed off and slightly paranoid fanboys have been searching for. What if it was all a conspiracy? The US government did it, man! They drove the planes into Sega, bringing down the franchise! They didn't want us to know what Echidna penises looked like, man! Oh God! Now I know why! That four-pronged suction cup thingy is burned into my brain matter. I think we all need a palate cleanser after that. So let's scamper away from tubular genitalia and instead jump into Sonic, the story you never knew. The unexplainable befuddlement of Sega and Sonic's fall from grace is a larger mystery than why JonTron left Game Grumps. I still want to know, damn it! In my last Sonic video, we touched on the blue blur's transition to 3D. Many die-hard fans consider this to be the watershed moment that eventually led to the fall of the Sonic franchise and of Sega as a whole. But they're wrong! Not about the putrid horror that was Sonic in 3D, but about it being the last nail in Sega's metaphorical coffin. While I do believe that Sega's transition to 3D was a puke-inducing disaster at best, Sega has since figured out ways to make 3D Sonic games playable and even fun. Games like Sonic Colors showed that Sega took their issues seriously, and fixed them by creating games with limited 3D movement. What I mean is that Sega would use two separate scene types to make Sonic in 3D playable. We'll call these scenes kinda 2D-ish, and kinda 3D-ish. Think of kinda 2D-ish as your classic Sonic game, but with HD graphics. These are the parts of the games where even though it's technically in 3D, Sonic plays like a 2D platformer. These sections actually seem good. Sonic is playable! And that's more than we've come to expect from Sega. After the dreaded horror of Sonic 06, Sega was all, well, maybe we should just make it seem 3D. They'll never suspect it! So in these sections, players really only have control of the X and Y axis. But to make the game feel as though it includes the third dimension, gameplay would switch between kinda 2D-ish and kinda 3D-ish. Kinda 3D-ish put the camera behind Sonic, so you can move him left and right, but not really forward or backward. The only difference is that Sonic runs into the Z axis instead of side to side. But the player still only controls his movements left and right. This gives an impression of 3D gameplay. But really, you're only moving in 2 dimensions. Check out when he rides a rail in Sonic Unleashed. There are QuickTime events here, but the player never actually has any control regarding the Z-axis. The game seamlessly transitions between these two types of scenes, creating the simulation of a full 3D game, when in reality, it isn't. These limitations keep Sonic halfway drunk instead of passed out on the ground choking on last night's ravioli. With these modern changes in place, Sonic is capable of actually going fast in the modern age. Hooray, Sega! You figured it out! And all the way back in 2010! You don't have to make bad games anymore! Why must you slander the name of Sonic the Hedgehog with your poop game filled with poop? How could this be? How could Sega make a game this bad after figuring out a decent formula for success 4 years earlier? Perhaps there are more factors at play here besides Sonic's transition to 3D. But at least we've determined that while shifting to 3D was an issue for Sonic, it wasn't the proverbial nail in the coffin that a lot of people thought. Take that, angry internet commenters who haven't learned that a neckbeard does not pair well with a fedora. no matter how well-groomed your neckbeard is. The truth is, what really crippled Sega in the long run was their inability to continually compete in the console wars. Let's go back, dear viewer, to the start of it all. At the dawn of time, there was Nintendo and the NES, and gamers saw that it was good. But as the stars collided and matter formed, the Sega Genesis came on to the console scene and started fucking shit up. Sega was Nintendo's first major competitor in consoles before Microsoft and Sony entered the picture, and frankly, they kicked ass. In 1994, Sega Genesis sales accounted for 55% of the 16-bit market, which was a monumental turnaround considering Nintendo had basically monopolized the console market just a couple of years prior. Sega got there through aggressive marketing campaigns that actively attacked Nintendo's consoles. A popular slogan was "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," which is catchy and sassy, just like Mrs. Pancakes.
Look, Mrs. Pancakes has a parachute, come on!
Hey, you don't know me.
Through this aggressive marketing, Sega was able to position itself as the console for older players, teens, and adults, while making Nintendo look like it was for kindergartners. The marketing tactic was so successful that the kiddie label is still stuck to Nintendo over 20 years later. With exciting marketing strategies that Nintendo refused to respond to, and exciting exclusives like Sonic on the Genesis, Sega was poised for a takeover of the console market. In fact, Sega was actually in the process of working with Sony on the PlayStation, and if that deal had succeeded, we might all be playing Sega PlayStations. So what the fuck happened? Well, it seems that Sega's executives took too much cocaine. Metaphorically speaking. Probably. Sega released console after console, not taking the time to truly perfect something that could last. They rushed releases like the Sega CD and Sega Saturn, which had to compete with the likes of the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation, and their huge library of quality games. But perhaps their biggest mistake was a surprise announcement at E3. Without informing the public, the media, or most developers, on that fateful day in the spring of 1995, Sega announced that the Saturn was in stores. Now, they had previously announced a September launch date later that year. In other words, they Scott Cawthoned the shit out of it. Except it didn't work. While this idea sounds like it could work, the Saturn came out with very few games on it since most developers didn't know about the plan. So games weren't ready when the Sega was released. And by the time the Saturn had titles to play on it, the N64 and PlayStation were out with their own exclusive and arguably better titles. And thus the seeds of metaphorical cocaine use were sown. But there's still more to this tale. Shortly after the release and failure of the Sega Saturn, their main marketing dude, Tom Kalinske, quit. This event seems to be the turning point for Sega. Tom had been behind Sega's immensely successful marketing prior to the Saturn's launch. And with this personnel turnover, Sega essentially shoved a massive chili dong up its own butt. The company tried to get back on track with the release of the Sega Dreamcast, which, to be fair, was a technically superior console for its time. But the damage was already done. Sega had released too many systems too quickly. The Sega Saturn was retired after 3 years. The Dreamcast was retired after only 2. For some context, the time between the original PlayStation and the PS2 was 6 years, which is a pretty normal life cycle. Sega had oversaturated its own market, destroyed the Saturn's image with a clumsy surprise release, and was already all but overshadowed by the time the Dreamcast came onto the market. In other words, they done fucked up. They done fucked up real bad this time. But why? Why does Sega still produce the biggest turds on the planet now? Since they lost their consoles, they can completely focus on game production. Each Sonic game should be fucking amazing. I should be eating chili dogs and yelling, "Gotta go fast," until I get blood clots and all my friends hate me. But I'm not, because like we've seen over and over again, Sega can't stop snorting cocaine! Metaphorically. Every Sega board meeting must go something like this. Okay guys, we gotta get another Sonic game out. If we start storyboarding today, we can have it out by the weekend, right? Is someone watching us? We gotta do this fast, before they find us, man! here's the final irony. No more metaphors or silly skits. Sonic's greatest strength was Sega's greatest weakness. Speed. Over and over again, we see Sega making speed their primary concern. In the early 90s, this was great. Their mascot was the fastest character alive, and their games were based on going fast. But they pushed too hard for everything to move quickly, and it cost them everything. They released consoles too quickly, devaluing their name and oversaturating their market. They released the Sega Saturn 6 months early without real gaming titles to back it, destroying the possibility of competing with the other consoles of the time. And they push out games year after year after year instead of taking the time to create games worth playing. Gotta go fast has been Sonic's motto for years, but it seems it's been Sega's motto too. Why would they put an emphasis on quantity over quality? Well, the answer is really quite simple, isn't it? Money. Moolah. The magic paper that makes the world go round, baby. Sega believes that as long as they are making money, they are succeeding. That's why they still release turd nuggets like Sonic Boom years after figuring out the formula to a successful 3D Sonic game. Instead of doing it themselves and taking their time, they hired out another company and released an unfinished game. It's why they decide to produce Sonic games every single year without bothering to make them good. They've been metaphorically snorting that Peruvian dancing dust since 1998 and have released at least one Sonic game every single year since. But Sonic isn't the only franchise that does this. Call of Duty has taken up that business strategy, and Assassin's Creed was releasing a game a year from 2009 to 2015. These are the companies people complain about because their games end up seeming rushed, unfinished, or rehashed. In today's age of gaming, exceptional AAA releases take longer than a year. But companies don't have to do this to make money. Companies can still take the quality approach to gaming without going bankrupt. Just look at Blizzard. They're an excellent example of a company that comes out with exceptional games time after time, with years in between releases. And these very good quality products end up dominating the genre of every game they release. World of Warcraft killed it in MMOs, StarCraft proxy rushed other RTSs, Overwatch is the bee's knees of hero shooters. Blizzard was founded in 1991, only 2 years after the release of Sonic the Hedgehog. To date, Blizzard has 6 games. Sonic has over 40, not including a shit ton of crazy spin-offs. And even now, Sega is releasing yet another fucking game that no one is going to want to play. Sure, if you release 40 games, one of them will probably be halfway decent, and maybe even good, but most of them are going to suck. We keep seeing this quantity over quality issue. We saw it last week with YouTube, and now we're seeing it with games. Sega has survived so far, but if they keep dragging their own name through the mud with shitty release after shitty release, how long will it be before gamers give up on Sega completely? Or is it already too late? If Sonic and Sega don't slow down, gaming is going to leave them in the dust. And that's the story. You never knew. Wait, were you thinking about leaving?
Permit denied.
First, I'd like to make a shout out to that boy Nick for animating our brand new intro. He's an awesome animator, so check out his channel. We'll put links in the description. If you need any animation work done, he's definitely your guy. Also, he's pretty good at Smash. And from there, I want to share something I love today. I want to share our awesome experience at PAX West and tell you about some great games that are coming out. Sound good? And just so you know, our thoughts here aren't sponsored or anything. We're just really excited about these games, and hopefully you will be too. We got to play this game called Blasters of the Universe. The name is kinda cheesy, but holy balls, people, virtual reality is getting to be super tight butthole. For this game, you get a gun and shield, and it's basically bullet hell in 3D. You're dodging, you're blocking, you're shooting, and it's a lot of fun. We also got to play Vikings, Wolves of Midgard, a game by the good people at Calypso Media. It's a dungeon crawler game of manliness, but don't worry ladies, you'll enjoy it too. You're this super ripped Viking dude who's fighting off ice giants and wolves while wishing you had worn more clothing because it's snowing. This game is very Diablo-esque, so Blizzard fans, keep your head up. Next is Abduction. This game is the spiritual successor to the legendary PC game Myst. We loved our time playing this one. Here you're transported to a bizarre alien world with human qualities scattered throughout it. It's a really beautiful adventure game where you explore and solve puzzles to figure out how to return home. And there's a bunch of pretty crystally things everywhere. But we didn't get far enough in the demo to figure out what they dawed. I just want to know, damn it! What do that there crystals do? Why did JonTron leave Game Grumps? Truly, these are the deepest mysteries of the universe. And next, we got to try out a new team-based FPS game called Mirage Arcane Warfare. It's currently only in alpha, but the game has a ton of potential. The developers are looking to create a game that's fun for everyone, but also has a really high skill ceiling to make it competitive. Simple actions like looking down will actually make your character bend over and duck so you can dodge if enemies swing horizontally. It's really cool. Tricks like this will become part of the game's meta down the line, and make it an excellent competitive game once it's released. Arguably the coolest meeting we had was with Adult Swim, because they're coming out with a virtual reality Rick and Morty game. The short demo was so awesome. You play as a Morty clone doing Rick's laundry when suddenly the world starts to end. It's just like a Rick and Morty episode, but you're in it. Oh, and the best part? It's called Virtual Rick-ality. Rick-ality. We got to try all these games plus a billion more. We also had our first panel in front of a live audience. Of course, it was the best panel in the entire convention, so it is a shame they didn't stream it. There's always next year though. We also got to meet some amazing YouTubers like Jeff Ramsey from Rooster Teeth and Philip DeFranco. As you can see, Philly D truly does love people's faces. If you haven't gotten a chance to go to a PAX yet, give it a shot if you can. It's an amazing experience where you're literally surrounded by a bunch of people that are as into games as you are. No longer are gamers limited to their lonely underground FAP dungeons. At PAX, it's one big FAP dungeon. Plus, we'll almost certainly be there, so you can come and chill with us. But until then, check out the first Sonic the Story You Never Knew by clicking that rectangle thingy on the screen. If you liked this video, we release a story you never knew every Thursday, so be sure to subscribe. Next week, we have an awesome episode about a huge title, which may or may not have butts in it. Thanks for watching. We love you.
Tell me about Tyler's skills playing this game.
Tyler is, one could say mediocre. I would say terrible. Another word is really, really bad. Those are multiple words.
So those would all be negative words.
One could say that. I would say he sucks donkey balls.
Okay.
If balls had another set of balls that were like smellier and worse than regular balls.
Right.
Those are the ones that he sucks on.
I see.